How's everybody doing?
What's happening, folks? Yeah, get in the picture a little bit. I can't tell who we're talking to.
So my name's Josh Guthrie.
I'm Clint Irvin. Both kind of out of Weaverville, growing up in North Buncombe area.
We've been club members with the Muskie Club since 2003. But our Muskie years started long before that, back when we were
in high school.
Started out, we were school buddies, and then playing ball, football, and then, Clint learned that I muskie fished, and then we started going muskie fishing together when
we were probably 16 and 17.
Yeah, I was
say.
Old enough to drive. But the story really starts way back when I was real young. My dad always had a fascination with muskies. He had some friends that had caught some. Over the years, it was never anything on a consistent basis, but he had buddies who had caught muskies, and would tell me stories about muskies, and I just, ever since I could remember, I was fascinated by it. And when I was maybe 8 or 9, we were at Lake Adger, and my dad hooked a muskie, and that's one of those things that just gets burnt into your brain, and you never forget it. And I know that's where it started for me, but it wasn't until I was 15 in 95 that I caught my first muskie, and my second was when I was 16. And then that's about the time Clint...
We started fishing together.
And
yeah, I guess up until that point, I just fished, BS waters or whatever, just small bass or trout and stuff like that. And, Josh and I have been buddies for a while, years since then, and started talking about these big fish in the French Broad, and we're like, well, let's go, him and his dad were doing it, and I basically just kind of fell into the groove of that, and we used to camp out Friday, Saturday nights, all through high school, chasing these stupid fish. I don't think my first fish was... I know I probably fished for 2 years at least without catching a fish. And that was, pretty much through high school. A lot of time spent without catching a fish for me getting started. But that's how it works. Especially back then with the French Broad not really being what it is today.
I think more than anything, it was the information available. Like, I would get magazines that were in fisherman magazines. I mean, Muskie Hunter was around, but I didn't really, I didn't realize, or take advantage of the means of getting, say, a Muskie Hunter subscription. But what we had was just local word of mouth, and I remember at the time, Bill Lyda, who
old man Muskie.
Yeah, who's an old man that used to fish the French Broad, and Clint and I used to see him, and he would talk to us and things, and he was a nice fella, and just sort of give us, just enough information to kind of keep us going.
Well, with him too, I remember, like, for the first several trips with Mr. Lyda, we'd see him and his one buddy fishing, and these guys would take their lures, and
yeah, that's true.
They would put their lures and rods underwater so we couldn't see what they were fishing.
Yeah.
I mean, they did that several. I mean, like,
that is true.
Until they realized that we weren't really going away and that we were gonna, see them every weekend. They started actually talking and being very, very informative.
True.
I won't forget that. That was. I'll do that this day to people if I don't know you.
Yeah. Well, and then not just that, you take Franklin's was our only source, like that was our only bait store.
Right there on Haywood.
Yeah, and if they didn't have a Rapala or a Rebel, back then, I know my favorite bait was Brokeback Brown by Rebel. And then our first branch off from that was when my dad and his friend went to Canada. And my dad came back and he had a couple of new lures, and one of them was the Jake. If you remember, the Jake he brought back, and it was just, and that was like the first branch off from a typical 5-inch Rapala or again the Brokeback Rebel.
4-inch Meps little spinnerbait or
Yeah,
something.
just anything that was sort of,
And we were rhino rods and
Ugly Sticks.
Ugly Sticks
was our rod, and of course Abu Garcia. But I think, well, I know actually, what really started to change for us, again, we had both caught a handful of muskies, and we obviously had been bitten by the bug, but it wasn't until 2000, and that's where it all started to sort of take a different direction when we got to
northerly.
Yeah, we got to talking about let's branch off, let's do something different, let's go somewhere else. We'd been fishing the French Broad and with some luck, but an Adger with absolutely no luck.
Still to this day.
Yeah. And then so the thought was let's branch out. And I remember one night I was reading In Fisherman and I seen Mille Lacs. And it was talking about Mille Lacs Lake. Now, if anybody obviously now everybody knows about Mille Lacs and everybody knows what type of lake it is, or even if they've read anything on social media, but we didn't know anything. All I knew is that I was reading about it, and it was talking about has a good musky fishery and big fish. So basically we decided
it was time to take a trip.
Let's go. And so
you weren't even old enough to drink.
Yeah, so I think I was 20, Clint was 21. This was in 2000. And so we set off. Now, so like the background of this, I have a 12-foot V-hull,
aluminum V-hull,
John boat, and a 9.9 game fisher,
and a troll motor mounted to a piece of metal.
Yes. And so Clint has 80-something,
85 military blazer.
We set off 20-something hours up north,
800 miles.
Yeah, to go to Mille Lacs. And on the way there, this was like the first red flag. On the way there, we stopped somewhere in Indiana, I think, and we can see a puddle of diesel fuel underneath the truck.
I forgot about the diesel actual
Yeah.
Bondo fix. Or
yeah. So that was
yeah.
So that was number one, but that was it until we get all the way there. We arrive in the vicinity of late night, and so we decide to go to sleep till it's daylight and people start opening up. And then we wake up, we're all pumped. We're only just about 20 minutes from our destination, or where we think we're headed.
Fire up the truck, and then the transmission stops. Like right there in the gas station. And it was just great. So we lock the front hubs, continue on. Go limp over to Mille Lacs.
Yeah.
Actually, I think we probably just stopped at a bar to talk about, if they knew campgrounds or any place we could stay, and they let us pitch tent right beside the bar. So we fished Mille Lacs for
one day. I think it was that afternoon. That's the only time we could fish it, because when we wake up the next morning, Mille Lacs is 130-something thousand acre bowl.
Yeah, with a 12-foot John boat.
And a 12-foot John boat and see, we didn't know this, and I guess a lot of people that know me and Clint know that we're not really the most prepared people. And so when you put us together, we just kind of go. And it might seem obvious now, but at the time we were just going. We didn't think anything about really calling and finding a place or really doing a whole lot of research. And that's just really us growing up and learning to a point.
I remember I guess the afternoon we fished, we got out, found a weed edge, and actually got to fish a little bit, and we didn't see anything. But the one thing we did see was another boat come through and fish that exact same weed edge.
Right.
And we were like, hey, dude's in a muskie boat, like doing the same thing we just did.
Exactly.
That was really our first look at any kind of weed edges. All we were used to is logs and moving water, which was just amazing. It's all the stuff we'd seen in magazines for, a handful of years. We actually started fishing one. And that was it from Lax. It totally said we could not fish there anymore. And we went to some campground with giant rabbits, that turtle and partridge and pike. Yeah. And it was horrible.
Yeah, so we were grounded. That was the thing. We couldn't travel anywhere. Even if there were musky waters nearby that were more suitable, we couldn't get to them because the truck was completely broke down. We were able to limp off of Mille Lacs to a nearby small lake that they had told us had pike and weeds. All the stuff. I mean, we were wanting to fish weeds. I mean, we'd kind of enamored by that, and so they get us to this one lake that's small that could facilitate our boat, and then we basically lived there for 10 days. We had to rent a car.
Rent a tow bar.
Traveled nearly to the Canadian border to pick up a tow bar.
And a U-Haul.
And a U-Haul to come back. And so one of the funniest of all of this is we got so tired of being where we were, and we rented this U-Haul truck.
Big enough to put the boat and trailer in it.
Yeah. So we threw the boat in the back of the U-Haul, and we drove to this other lake. And the locals had been telling us that, if anything, it had bigger pike in it because we were catching handlebars. Yeah. And so we get there, and we back down this boat ramp, and people are watching us. In a U-Haul. We open up the back. Pull out the ramp, and we slide we slide the John boat in the water.
Good times. Yeah. Didn't catch anything there either.
Yeah.
At all.
So that was trip number one. I mean, it was a learning experience.
It was certainly that.
It was. And so, we learned, number one, you can't just wing it when you're going up north. I mean, there's pretty serious implications there. I mean, obviously.
Absolutely.
And everybody might think, well, that's just a no-brainer. But to us, that was a lesson we absolutely had to learn, and learn the hard way. But it was an adventure. I mean, I can't tell you how many times we've been able to tell these stories to our friends and just get a laugh. I mean, that's something you'll never forget. I mean, that's been 20 years,
I guess it's about that.
Yeah, over 20 years. So now, and then we were more prepared the next year, which is in 2001.
It was a trip to the flowage.
Yep. Clint had seen, or actually his mom had shared something with him that the world record muskie was caught out of the Chippewa flowage in Wisconsin.
So the only reason we went there was because of Louis Spray.
Yep.
And his leaded fish.
That's right. And so we actually became more prepared that trip. We found Cisco's Pine Point Resort.
Had a place to stay on the water.
Yeah.
Brought a boat.
Yep.
It wasn't that same boat. It was
16-foot flat bottom John
with like a 15 or 25.
25 horse engine on that one.
The flowage was a good time. That lake definitely had everything a muskie lake should have, and being our second trip, out of the state fishing, it was just there was a lot to take in.
Yeah, that's the key. I mean, you got this vast body of water full of weeds. Actually, it's got a whole lot of different structure in it. But, that was another learning experience, that even though that we were prepared, more so than we were the first trip.
At some point, yes.
We still realized we didn't really know what we were doing, and we were, I'll never forget this. We'd be traveling. People would be fishing in the middle of the lake, casting lures.
We just go flying by them.
Yeah, we just fly by them because in most of our lakes, these reservoirs, you travel in the middle of the lake, you're in the deepest part, right? And so that's not the case up north.
Not always.
I mean, there's humps and there are areas that you don't have any clue about if you're not prepared.
Did we have electronics? We probably had a simple graph.
Yeah, so exactly, and didn't know how to use it.
I'm sure that's all we had was like a hummingbird or something at that point.
Exactly. And so we're traveling down the lake, and I'll never forget this. And it wasn't, and we'll get to the third year that we were up north. That even then, we just seen people casting, and if you would have asked me, I would just felt like they were just casting open water.
Open water.
And didn't have a clue. You're just like, well, they're just chunking, and we would go to find the nearest bank. And then we would look for weeds, and we would just be casting banks. That's all we ever knew, and that's just where we were. And we spent 10 days on the flowage. And
I don't think we've seen maybe one.
Yeah, maybe one muskie we saw that trip, but still we had a good time.
And we spent 10 days hard fishing, especially back then. We were so gung ho. That's all we did. This is before we even knew anybody. So this is Josh and I up there fishing, and all new stuff. So of course, wasn't anything but a great memory.
Yeah.
No pictures.
Mm-hmm. So fast forward now to 2002, and I'm watching a Bass Pro Shops thing on TV, and Pete Mena, and at that time he was what we knew as a celebrity muskie fisherman
To us, right?
To us, and he had a muskie show, or Bass Pro Shops was highlighting him doing a muskie show, and at the end of that show, Pete Mena said he got in the Hayward area and the Chippewa flowage, and so I'll never forget this. I called Clint up and said I've got a number for Pete Mena. He's like, well, give it a call. So I call it up, and Pete Mena actually answers the phone. And at first, I act like a goober. I'm actually talking to Pete Mena. He goes, yeah, this is Pete. What do you want, basically? And I'm like, well, I just saw you on TV, and, my friend and I fished the flowage this past year. We'd like to hire you for a guide. And he goes, well, I don't guide anymore. He said, that was an old show. He said, I pretty much do other things now. He said, but I tell you what. He said, Ty Sennett is the best guide there is on that lake. Here's his number. Call him. So I called Ty Sennett, and we set up a trip
basically around Ty. Yeah.
Yep. With him on the flowage, and then we're back in 2002. And again, so for I guess that second year, we learned we don't really know what we're doing. We need some help.
Right. I think that was the biggest thing. It was like, if we're spending all this time, effort, and money, let's swallow our pride and hire a guy. And that was one of the, biggest decisions, that helped us throughout the whole muskie thing was hiring Ty Sennett. That year, we probably went up, fished for a day without him. Got in a boat the next day with him.
Yeah.
And he showed us how to actually fish, structure.
Yeah. That is, so to fast forward to fishing with Ty, he would stop on these main lake areas where you're almost like you're in the middle of nowhere. And like, well, what are we doing? And then he shows us, this is what we're doing. This is a hump that comes up to 6 feet. This drops off over here to 12 to 15. We're throwing up on that. And then it all started clicking. Like, these people weren't fishing open water.
Right, they were actually fishing, this hidden structure we never even knew to look at.
Yeah, exactly. And it was just a life-changing for more reasons than anything, you know, just the reality of, you know, and then taking that info and looking at maps, and then, I mean, at this point in time,
that's it. We had a map. Our thing was to take the map and have the people mark places on the map where the spots to fish were.
yeah,
Like, it was just, I wish we could find it. I mean, one of our maps had all sorts of marks. I guess it was a flowage.
yeah, and we still have it. And even then, like, they would mark a map, but we wouldn't know how to fish it. You know, we just knew we'll go to this area and just start casting.
Right.
So, you know, and with that, you know, on that trip, you know, I caught my first 50-incher with Ty that day. And then, you know, you get into a handful of fish too.
Yeah.
You know, and anyway, that was the beginning, and more than anything, I feel like that was the most beneficial is that, you know, we kind of hit it off with Ty. You know, he was a young guide at the time. We were
A couple of years older than us, pretty much. So,
yeah,
pretty quick friends. I think we fished with him a couple more times that trip.
mm-hmm.
Like no charge, just kind of as buddies, you know, after hours or whatever. And that was definitely what, you know, changed it all, I guess, if you can say that. But meeting Ty.
Yeah, because he set us up. All right, so that's where it starts. He's telling us about the Chicago Muskie show.
Everyone's there. Gotta go.
Yep. Lures, people, information, you know, so that began not only our trips up north to fish, but our trips up north during the winters to...
For the weekend.
Yep.
Chicago Muskie Trade Show.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was the first year? Was
2003.
2003. You know, Josh and I hop on a plane out of Asheville and fly to Chicago for the weekend just to see all the new lures and the baits. And, you know, it was a trip. I guess was that when we met?
We met Greg Thomas.
Met Greg up there that year.
Mm-hmm. And we set up a trip with Greg to fish Green River Lake in Kentucky.
Green.
Yeah.
So that's the year we had, I'm sure that was the year we had breakfast with probably the one Linder.
Yep. James
sure.
Linder.
Sat down and had breakfast with James Linder.
Pete Mana.
Pete was, yeah, I mean, it was everything you can imagine like a trade show for fishermen would have been. You know, we actually stayed in the hotel where all the guides and lure makers stayed. It was absolutely just, it was great.
Yeah, I mean, we were in our world. You know, that was, you know.
Kept saying, who are these two little rednecks from North Carolina? They don't have muskie. We show them a few pictures, and yeah, they were kind of surprised we had fish down here.
And so, just even from that, like meeting Ty, going to Chicago, that's where we met Greg Thomas, set up a trip with him, and we went in spring of 2003. We fished Green River Lake for the first time. And so, and then meeting Greg, and Greg was our age, but obviously a very seasoned angler at that point. And we learned a lot of things there, and so we're kind of more like in Southern Reservoir. We're not dealing with weeds, but we're dealing with shallow water.
Yep.
I mean, that's the one thing that kind of blew my mind too, like the areas that he would take us, just such shallow water. I mean, this was things that I don't know whatever preconceived notions that we had gathered up to that point in our lives, you know. And then we learned how to short line troll.
But you think about it, the whole time that first trip with Greg was when?
In the spring.
Which,
right.
You know, looking back on it now, that's probably why we're in all that shallow water.
Right.
I mean, like,
yeah.
I mean, it's just all stuff that, you know, Greg was very resourceful.
Yep. And once again, you know, ended up being a really good friend even to this day, you know, and that's just how it began, you know, and it's funny, like we sit back and we kind of made ourselves a timeline here before we started this, and it's just like, wow, you know, we have just so many years going up north at a point in time in our lives when we're in our early 20s into our 30s. And it's just like that 10 years in our life where, you know, all we did was fish.
Like, that's it.
And we would go, like going up north, and it wasn't just that we were fishing the French Broad. I mean, we were traveling all over because, you know, we went back to the flowage in 2004 and just, man, we had such a good time.
That was the year we met Tanner
Wilds.
And like hung out just with Tanner and Ty basically the whole time. I mean, like every opportunity Ty had, we were in the boat, or Tanner, we were in the boat with him. And that was I think that was a trip where Ty showed us how they did their no wake zone through the bay.
Yeah.
Where they had all the buoys, and he's like, let me show you the Wisconsin no wake, and just hammers it and hits every buoy he can with the side of his boat. Like,
yeah.
The flowage was, that was good times.
I know.
Oh.
And then 2005, we fly to Minnesota, and we meet up with Tanner, who drives us across the border. We go to Lake of the Woods.
And we go up there with several other guides and a couple of their buddies, and this is all their vacation is. They take a week off to go fish Lake of the Woods. And we got invited. So we're talking Ranger boats, you know, 200 horsepower engines on the biggest musky lake you could ever think of.
Yeah.
Not having to think about what we're doing either, which was great.
That's true.
We
were just along for the ride and fishing.
Yes, that was what Jim Stella.
Yeah.
I remember Stella, didn't he tie that one bucktail, spent like hours tying a bucktail right there in the boat, because like I think it was like red and copper or something they were eating. And then,
was the hot color.
And then when he goes to like make a cast, he totally forgets to clip his bait and just throws it in the water.
Yeah, he thinks it's on the other end of his line. He gets done tying it, chunks it in, grabs his rod, and realizes he just threw the bait down in the water.
Yeah, that was though that Canada trip was cool. I mean, again, because we had the actual gear and the knowledge and the people, you know, to fish with. I'm sure I can't remember. We all caught fish.
Yeah. Now everybody. It wasn't one of their best years, of course. You know, it's just like seems like when me and Clint go anywhere, that's usually the way it works, and that's okay. You know, sometimes, but we had such a good time. I mean, the year before, I think 100 muskies were caught. The year we went, amongst the group anyway, and then the year we went, I think 20-something fish were caught. So you can imagine the numbers was way down.
But to us, it did not matter.
No.
I mean, we were fishing Lake of the Woods.
Yeah, I mean it's.
You know, at this point, we knew the reputation of that lake, and for us to be there at whatever age, 24, 25.
Yeah.
I guess, just who would have thought that?
Yeah.
But again, pretty much thank you, Ty.
Exactly. Yeah. And then we followed that up with a trip. And then in between that time, we met Derek Argotti.
Mm-hmm.
And so the next year, we went to the flowage. Derek went with us. And we caught more fish there because you've got a third brain, an Argotti brain in the boat.
That we had the Argotti horseshoe, so that always helps.
Yeah, and it's just an extra drive of fishing as far as, Derek's full of drive. And so, just added that other element. We fished with Ty and stuff again. No, maybe we didn't on that trip, but either way, we were able to catch more fish than what we had, so that was good.
And again, at this point, we go up there and we feel like, Josh and I are like guiding Derek around almost. We're like, oh, we know all these spots and we know how to do this, and this is what you want to do here, and you want to look for this little pocket in the weeds, and it's just amazing how a couple years fishing, certain styles of lakes can, you start seeing these things that we have learned over the years, and it's definitely coming together at this point.
Yeah. And then the year following that we decided to take a break on Wisconsin. So that was like our 4th year at the Flowage, 1 year spent in Canada, 1 year at Mille Lacs in Minnesota. Well, that's when we decided to go to Miltona in Minnesota.
Well, because Greg said.
That's right.
We had fished with Greg a couple times at this point. I know we went to Cave.
Quite a few times at Cave and Green.
Before we ever even went to Miltona.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was years later.
We were taking weekend trips to Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
We fished Buckhorn at that time.
Yeah.
Stayed on a houseboat in Buckhorn. I can't remember if we...
Yeah, I wish I feel bad that I'm not remembering this guy's name.
I kind of can't remember either.
But he was a fella. He was another guide that guided a lot at Buckhorn in Kentucky, which does have quite a bit of muskies in it too. And we went there. We didn't catch anything, but we got to fish Buckhorn. And all of this was long before we even knew about Melton Hill. You know.
I don't even know if we were fishing James.
No, James
we weren't fishing James or Roadhiss.
Yeah, I mean these were all waters before anybody really knew about them, so we were finding these other waters long ways off to kind of compensate from the whole French Broad River Azure.
Pretty much.
I'm not going to...
choices.
Right. And so that's where, the 3 lakes in Kentucky, and then we would go up north, of course. And then somewhere in those years, I'm pretty sure we were talking, it was like 2005 is when we found out about Melton Hill for the first time.
Right. I think you were saying something about Glenn had told you something about an email or something, or about people bass fishing, catching muskie and not happy. And
yeah, he was on a bass page hearing bass fishermen complain about muskies breaking their line. So... And apparently it was happening pretty often, so that was enough to spark our interest. So me, Glenn, and Clint jumped in the boat in December and head over there, and we ended up catching 8 or 10 muskies in like a day or 2 days,
Out of the hot hole.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, again, I think we showed up first, we were just talking, and we're fishing
Bull Run,
thinking, and we actually moved a couple fish. Thinking, man, this is kind of cool. Then somehow we realized we were in the wrong area, and then went to the hot hole, and it was literally like every cast there's fish behind the bait. Didn't matter what you threw. Like it was very, very odd.
Yeah,
to say the least.
Pretty surreal.
Like you said, caught.
Do you remember what year that was?
Thinking it was 2005.
Yeah.
I know this. I mean, you try to the timeline of everything. Because we hadn't been members of the club for very long, and I know we didn't know, we had, I don't think we knew Derek yet, I know, and that's why I was trying to think, because he wasn't with us, and he would have been.
Right, if we would have known him.
Yeah,
sure.
He would have been, because it was the 3 of us, and then, And then, I know Wayne was then with us, and I'm trying to think of, the progression of, Wayne was with us, the next weekend, type deal. So that's why I'm trying to think. I'm pretty sure we met Derek in 05, because Derek would have been right there with us if we would have known him. And,
sure.
Yeah, so pretty sure that was the year. It was 04 or 05 we got into him over on Melton Hill. And then in Lake James come about in 06. And I know that because I know where I was when I got the call from Glenn that he just caught a muskie over there. And then the next day he calls, I got another one. At first you think, this is a fluke.
Right.
And then when Glenn gets another one, and then another one, and another one, it's like, he's found something. And this is all, it's just a good progression of things,
Oh, absolutely.
And then we start migrating there, and it's just awesome because this is just also brand new, We're finally branching out from the norms. There's other places really close by.
Oh, yeah. That kind of that's a lake. That's something we don't know. And
Yeah, and then in that same time frame, well, it's a few years later, but you got other rivers in the area.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like the Nolichucky, all of a sudden becomes, wow, that's got muskies in it too. You know, and
But like, you know, we were saying about Miltona, like our first trip to Miltona was because of Greg Thomas.
yeah,
Greg said, you know, we talked, I guess, and he's like, man, you guys, I guess we were planning a trip.
yeah,
And he's like, you guys got to come up here to Minnesota. He's like, we're not saying the name of the lake. Hell, he didn't want us to say for a while. I mean, like,
yeah, we couldn't really tell anybody where we went.
I mean, and he's like, you guys come up here, and that first year was what? Cowgirls, right? Is
Yeah.
that when we met the cowgirl?
Met the cat. Yep.
I mean, went to his shop, and like, was that when we bought baits right from the shelf? Like, was that?
Yeah,
the
that was
first
the
year?
second year.
Was the second trip up there?
Yeah, but the first one, no, it was that year.
I think so.
Yeah. So the cowgirl was made in that vicinity where Matona was at.
Yep.
And that's just exactly, that's where all that was. And then that was just a whole nother element of fish, because we were catching muskies, and I'm talking monsters.
Yeah, there's big fish coming out of Miltona.
We all got 50 inchers,
Yep.
and I mean, I'm big 50 inches.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, just like hefty fish.
Yeah.
And it was, you know, a completely different style of fishing up in Miltona. You couldn't see anything. You were casting out in the middle of nowhere, fishing up, you know, a bar that came up, you know, it stopped at 18 feet, but had 6 feet of weeds on top of it, but still was like, you know, 8 feet underwater.
Yeah.
So you couldn't even see the weed tops. And, you know, just fortunately, again, we kind of had Greg kind of, you know, giving us information and, you know, telling us kind of how to fish, you know, deep weed edges. And, you know, it was, you know, we can fish a deep weed edge without seeing it now. You know, it was really a different lake completely, because that's all it had. It didn't have the structure we were used to coming out of Wisconsin, like the bogs and the, you know, everything Miltona you barely could see.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, like,
And even how you fished, like with Wisconsin, the weeds come nearly to the top, so you almost was burning bucktails. You know, you were reeling very steadily to keep the bucktails above the weeds, or even like when you were fishing crankbaits through the weeds. You know, with Miltona, like Clint said, the weeds came from very deep, and they topped out 6 feet below the surface. I mean, you wouldn't have had a clue they were even there. And then even how you present your bait, you know, the way you reel in a bucktail is like anything that goes, at the time, went against anything that we had ever known. Like
Absolutely.
a very slow roll. You know, the thing that made the cowgirl what it was is a big bait, big blades that you could chunk out there.
that spin fast, cranking slow.
You could crank, and it was just like chugga chugga chugga. But as it did that, that bait would sink and roll. I mean, you could imagine just that the bait would get down. It's all about, you know, being in the strike zone. That's obvious, but sometimes you don't know what that strike zone is, you know. And then our learning curve, which was Greg Thomas, you know, taught us real fast. You know,
That's right.
that's the way it was. I mean, it was just priceless information, and we caught some very, very big fish that trip. And then the 3 years we went to Miltona, I mean, that was just what it was.
I was at, well, we went up there the 1 year and was suckers, right? Wasn't it
Yes,
all about
right.
sucker fishing?
It was.
We did a lot of sucker fishing with Greg over at Cave,
Yeah.
too, didn't we?
That's true. And so, well, that's right. So our last year was 2011. That I know we've been up north. So it kind of got, we ain't been in about 10 years now, going on 10. But we were later that year than we'd ever been. And the whole reasoning was like Greg was fishing suckers. And so we went out with him one time.
Yep.
But when I say fishing suckers,
Talking like,
these things were 5-pounders.
yeah, they were like 2 foot, 30-inch suckers. I mean, they were literally that big.
I'll never forget. I opened up this Tupperware that he had, and I looked in there, and I looked at him. I was like, "We're not fishing with those." And he goes, "Oh yeah."
Oh yeah.
And I really thought I don't know what in my mind, because when you think of suckers, like in the river, you're looking from 12 to 16-inch suckers that are, you know, something that in your mind the fish would eat. But these things were, like he said, I mean, they were like baby carp.
I mean, they literally were giant, and we floated those things around and named them. And
Well, yeah, and I'll never forget this. Like, so I'm thinking, there's just no way a muskie can eat this thing. The very first fish caught, Clint caught it, was a 42-inch muskie on a 5-pound sucker.
well, it
Or
was
was
all,
it a 45? It was a 42. It was something.
it was all about the technique too. Remember how you had to use the trolling motor,
Yeah.
and like the deal was, once you get the fish, you feel it nibbling or chewing on it or whatever. You just don't go start smacking it with the hook or the rod. You remember Greg's like, you got to pull them up so slow that you could see to where you could see how the fish was actually holding your bait or the sucker in his mouth. Then he's like, well, then you want to jam on the trolling motor one way, jerk the rod the other way, and you know that's what we did. We walked up a couple muskies from out of the deep, you know, to where we could see where our hooks were, and you know we were hooking them like that, and it was again something new we learned.
Yeah.
You know, and that they will come right out of the deep with a 4-pound fish hanging out of their mouth. Yeah, that Miltona was a pretty cool lake.
Well, and that actually was in Detroit Lakes.
Was
The sucker fishing was.
on Detroit?
Yes. Well, we traveled to Detroit, which is about 45 minutes from Miltona.
Okay.
Yeah, and so that's how that one went. So anyway, that was our final trip. Well, the year before that, or a couple years before that, me and Keith went back to Miltona and did good. We both caught fish, caught some big fish. You know, just had a really good time. You know, hanging out with Greg and meeting Jason Hammernick. And anyway, it was just fun. You know, and I think more than anything, like for Clint and I to be able to sit down and kind of go over, because it's been a long time since we've really done anything.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like I haven't been in a boat or. Yeah, it's been good to sit around and talk about like trips in the past and how much they've really taught us how to fish and how how to look at things differently. Especially coming from here, just having basically 2 bodies of water we started fishing from. Now Josh and I have fished, I would say, over 20 lakes, probably.
Yeah, easily.
I mean, it's been great. It'd been cool if we had more pictures from actual like the story itself and not so many just like fish pictures, because there was so much along the way that we've got a picture of us sitting in a tire place in Indiana with the boat on the trailer with no tires. Just of course we start the trip with tires that are about to explode. I mean, just it did not matter.
We get to Indiana and we're like, you know what?
I think there was one point we had a grill going in the back of the truck while we were driving, so we didn't have to stop and eat. It's just we went we went at it 100% and like caution to the wind. I know the one trip we didn't tow a boat to Wisconsin, rented one. And like at some point we wrecked it or wrecked the foot or the prop, and like Josh had to take it back, and it was in the evening and like 6-foot waves and a storm, and I'm in the truck meeting them over there, and
I really thought I was going to die that day, and that's not a joke. I thought that was my end.
That was probably about the worst of like the weather I can remember.
Yeah.
You know, those trips with our guidey they were great. I know, you know, with him in Wisconsin that was a lot of fun. You know, fishing top water, you know, that was stuff we never fished until we got up north. You know, once we met Ty, you know, that pretty much changed all our fishing, you know, our muskie fishing. You know, the trips to Chicago had their own 20-minute stories in each day. You know, there's just so much going on. You know, we're getting all sorts of baits now. I mean, I remember our first trip to, I guess it was Wisconsin or Minnesota, when we actually went to a bait shop.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
went into a store that actually had, you know, 150 muskie baits. And we were just blown away.
Yeah.
You know, the net we have right to this day, I think I had to wrestle Ty Sinnott for it, and like at his house, and that's how we got our net. I mean, I had to wrestle Ty Sinnott for it.
Yeah.
It's been. We need to get this back on the schedule.
Yeah, I know. I think more than, you know, obviously, you know, if there's any, you know, and this is us reminiscing a lot too, but in the same thing, you know, even some lessons to learn, you know, like it's easy to be in a comfort zone here and around your waters. And then obviously trips up north can be monetarily taxing, but, you know, to take the opportunity to branch out and go up north, hire a guide. They're super expensive, but I'm telling you, they're so worth it. You know,
It was.
Yeah, I mean, it just brings the learning curve down. But more than anything, it's the experience of fishing other things, different waters. You know, I'm very thankful that we got to do that. And I know this, you know, and this is not trying to be, you know, if me and him weren't buddies, like I can't imagine like I'd have that initiative by myself.
I probably would have never done
to do that
or remembered how to get there. So,
you know, and so that's awesome, you know, that you can share that, and then
that's just probably the best thing of it is being able to share it with somebody.
Yeah.
And, you know, hopefully we get, you know, share it a little bit with you guys. You know, there's still so much more, you know, in those 10 years that we just overlooking or, you know, PG rated. There's about the best we can do on a lot of that. I mean, because there was a lot of time when we were in Wisconsin, you know, after hours out of the boat, hanging out with Ty, and just like, you know, getting to a point like I mean, same with Greg. You know, with Greg, you know, we'd fish with him in Kentucky, and then we'd go hang out with him met Tony Grant, and just hanging out with these guys, and just, you know, it was more than just on the water. It was, you know, a lot of behind, you know, after the boat's on the trailer. And, you know, those are the things that, you know, it's been really cool about the whole story. You know, the fishing, you know, we've got, you know, a couple books of fishing pictures, but, you know, hopefully everyone, you know, has got those. You know, to me, it's about the story that, you know, gets you to that spot. And Josh and I have had some good stories, some good times.
Yeah.
Spent a lot of money chasing fish, a lot of time. You know, it's great now. Like our little group messages, all about hunting. I don't know if you guys have noticed. Josh and I, we don't comment. We don't.
We don't hunt.
We never. All we did were chase muskies. And that is literally it. Like, we never brought a bass rod or a pike rod, or, you know, we caught a pike and we were truly upset. And it's comical now. You know, like all the other things we could have been doing instead of trying to catch one fish. You know, like, but it is what it is, and that's where we're at. Yeah.
So hopefully we ain't bored you to death. But I mean, I know this was cool. Thanks, Tim, for giving us the
man,
opportunity
thank
to
you.
reminisce. And
Let me take a chance to ask a couple. If you guys do it slowly, I can only see 3 comments at a time. If you want to ask a question, ask a question. How did your travels up north, when you came back and went back to fishing home waters, how did that improve your fishing here from what you learned up there?
I think a lot of our stuff up north taught us how to use our electronics and our graphs. Was like being able to see what you can't like visibly see with your eyes. And you know, because that's a lot of that. You know, I know we did always have a graph up north, or you know, when I think that helped a lot. You know, being able to use, and then looking for against structure you can't see. You know, coming back, going up there was all logs, log jams and moving water. Coming back, it's now we've got flats. Now we've got edges and drop off and points and channels and inside curves, and water's moving faster over here, or this gets sunshine first. It warms up faster. All this stuff we learned up north.
I think, and Clint's exactly right. And I think instead of muskies just live in timber, it's about muskies feed around edges. Like a log is an edge. It's a vantage point for that fish. Same thing as a drop off. Same thing as a weed edge. It puts more into perspective why fish use what they use. It's an understanding of the fish in that aspect, as opposed to, oh, that's just where you see a fish in a certain area on the French Broad or at Lake Azure. It's more than, oh, the fish was just there. It's more than happenstance.
Right.
There's puts it into a different perspective.
So Chris Kane asked, how does Lake Azure compare to the Kentucky lakes?
Well, it compares because it's minus the weeds that, say, a cave run would have, but it's a reservoir with a dam, so you have a distinct channel. You have your timber. But in a lot of ways, I'll say this. What we also did after fishing with Greg in Kentucky, using some of the shallower water, we weren't so much afraid to go into the backs of these coves. Like Jackson has some very shallow water. Little Jackson has some shallow water. Piney Point. I mean, these areas, like, I would spend more time fishing that I would have never really wasted my time with before, because of, like, in the springtime, these fish going really shallow. And I think what it was, because Azure, even on a smaller scale, has these same things, these feeder creeks that come into these lakes that for some reason or the other is drawing in bait fish, which is drawing in the muskies. I mean, you've got the spawn going on, but you've also got bait fish going in shallow too, and that's what's bringing these fish there. And so I think the similarities there, being a southern reservoir, can be applied, and that's kind of how I always reasoned it.
I'm glad you answered that one. I heard something about Azure and Cave
Yeah.
Run, so
Yeah.
I'm glad you got that one.
Yeah. Chris Bidov asked, when did you first learn about moon phases in this whole progression, and how much did you really kind of work on that?
Well, I guess the biggest way we've always looked at it is like, well, up to a certain point was like, especially on a trip, we're fishing regardless of what time it is. I know for years we always tried to pay attention to like moon phases, but it really didn't I guess matter that much to us back then.
No, I agree 100%. When I fished in that 10 years that I fished the most, I didn't really care. I was more into low light periods, be it overcast, early, late, things like that got me more pumped. The one individual that I can only speak for myself that really highlighted moon phases for me was Wayne.
That's what I was just gonna say.
I mean, he truly was. Wayne brought.
He was the one who kept saying, you know, what time was it? When was the moon? When was this?
He really did. I mean, he gave a presentation in the Muskie Club one time on moon phases, and he really started harping on it. And I'll say this because there's a level of respect with Wayne. Obviously, Wayne catches a lot of fish, but Wayne catches a lot of very big fish.
Probably a reason.
And he's a consummate thinker. Like I've always bragged about Wayne on this, is because he thinks so much. I mean, there's always a reason with Wayne, beforehand and after. And then when he really started highlighting muskies or moon phases, and I'll say this, I started looking at moon phases more when I stopped fishing as much. Because Clint nailed it on the head. When you're going all the time, it doesn't matter. It never mattered to me. Now
we figured we were going to be, you know, fishing, you know, all day anyway. So again, like you know, that 10 years probably moon phases wasn't a big.
Yeah, and it would more so now, like we know more about the moon phases, like put yourself on a better spot per se at the right time, but maybe not. If you're fishing the river, you're going to be where you're at in your drift, and if you fish the river enough, you know where fish are everywhere, you know, so you just make sure you're in a good spot. But I'll say this, the moon phases helped more, like if you don't go very much, kind of puts you over the edge. And I've had some experiences on moon phases that I can attest to the moon phase, whereas back then when I didn't look at them, I wouldn't have put the correlation together.
I caught this fish at this time and it's moon phase.
Or this really good day I'll never forget, I caught 4 muskies within an hour and a half right on a moon phase, and I would have just thought, I'm just kicking, you know, I'm just a bad dude. But
you took all the credit for it.
Yeah. Whereas I was like, I hit a certain stretch of river at a really good time, really good moon phase.
I just had some kind of phone issue. We still got 14 people watching. We're going to close it up pretty quick. I want to thank these two guys for doing, I mean, seriously, this was like a really, really cool, I mean, you guys just sat here and conversed for a long time and went through some really cool information and memories about what a lot of us really look back on. And if there's 2 things I can say that we can all do to improve our muskie experiences is take more pictures than just fish, because these memories, I mean, the older we get, you know, as taking part of the club that I have, I'm seeing the older guys. You know, we had Seth Freeman from Madison County, who's always been a dues paying member, but he never attended a meeting since the 80s. He just passed away 2 days ago. Always turned his numbers in. Always fished with Don a bit. But there's a lot of these memories that if you don't document them, then they're just forgotten. And I feel like it's really important. And that's why we had this meeting. And I can't say that I could have imagined it going better than the conversation these two guys just sit here and had.
We probably could talk for another hour if you want.
Well, it looks like the phone ain't gonna handle it. But you know, we may come back and you know, try to do some more. Maybe we can talk you guys into getting the boat and let's all do a big trip somewhere once this
that's all I would absolutely
COVID trash is out of our way.
Figure out a way to get like the club to it.
Well, we were going to do a trip to Cave Run, and you know, with the pandemic coming down the way it has, I've banged off of that, and we've struggled to do meetings the way that we could reach out to both, you know, club members and the public at the same time. Now, I think this was a really good public meeting. So thanks to both of you for doing this, because that was a really, really great meeting.
Well, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
You've got lots of thank yous and lots of great wishes on here. I'll make sure and screenshot them and send them to you just so you can see what people are saying. All right, guys. Everybody have a good night.
Have a great evening. Go catch the fish. Or tell a story.